The wrench slipped from Sarah Mitchell's calloused fingers as another round of laughter echoed from the waiting area. She wiped her hands on her navy coveralls and adjusted her safety glasses, trying to block out the sound of wealthy customers sharing stories about their expensive cars. At 42, she'd mastered the art of invisibility at Hudson's auto shop. "Wrench witch strikes again," she heard someone whisper as she passed a group of young mechanics. The nickname had stuck for 5 years now, ever since she'd started appearing silently to fix problems and vanishing before anyone could properly thank her. They thought it was cute. They had no idea how terrifyingly accurate they were. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. What they didn't know was that Sarah carried a secret so explosive. It could reshape everything they thought they knew about personal protection. Her official title was Senior Engine Specialist, focusing on high-performance vehicles, fuel systems, and computer diagnostics, tasks that kept her close to the machines, but invisible to the people. She preferred it that way. Some secrets were worth protecting with silence. The morning routine never changed. Arrive at 7 a.m. sharp, check the overnight service tickets, and begin her rounds. The maintenance bay was her sanctuary, filled with the familiar hum of diagnostic equipment and the metallic smell of engine oil. Here among the Porsches and Ferraris, she could almost forget who she used to be, almost. But every bolt she tightened, every system she calibrated was a reminder of skills that once made her the most feared operative in the field. Derek Williams swaggered into the garage with his usual entourage of young mechanics, their uniforms crisp and their egos inflated from another successful repair on a celebrity's vehicle. At 32, Williams was everything the shop wanted in a supervisor: confident, charismatic, and completely unaware of his own limitations, or the woman who could outfight him with her eyes closed. "Hey, wrench witch," Williams called out, his voice carrying across the garage. "Planning to learn self-defense from those online videos again?" His buddies laughed on cue. Tyler Brooks, barely out of technical school, added with a smirk, "Yeah, we need someone who can actually handle themselves in dangerous situations, not just read about them in manuals." If only they knew that the woman they were mocking had once neutralized 6 armed insurgents in 30 seconds while protecting a diplomat in hostile territory. Sarah looked up from the fuel injection system she was calibrating, her dark hair pulled back in its usual tight ponytail. She could see the humor in their eyes, the casual dismissal that came so easily to those who'd never faced real danger. She'd seen that same look in her own mirror once, years ago, when she thought she was invincible. "Just doing my job, Derek," she said quietly, her voice barely audible over the garage's ambient noise. Williams stepped closer, his confidence radiating like heat from an overworked engine. "Your job is to keep these cars running, not to pretend you understand what real danger is. There's a difference between reading self-defense manuals and actually protecting yourself when someone's trying to hurt you." The other mechanics nodded in agreement. They'd all heard the stories about female mechanics who'd never had what it took to make it in dangerous situations. In their minds, Sarah was just another wrench turner who'd never understood the realities of personal protection. Sarah's hands stilled on the fuel system for a moment. She considered telling them about the time she'd disarmed 3 attackers in an alley so narrow that her shoulders nearly scraped the brick walls. She thought about describing the sensation of adrenaline flooding her system in a crisis, or the split-second calculations required to neutralize multiple threats simultaneously. Instead, she smiled softly, closed her technical manual, and walked away. No reaction, no argument. Just the quiet dignity of someone who had nothing to prove to anyone. But as she rounded the corner toward the next vehicle, her fingers unconsciously traced the small scar on her left forearm, a reminder of the day her cover had been compromised, and she'd still managed to extract her entire team safely. The young mechanics didn't notice Frank Donovan watching from the shadows near the tool cabinet. At 60, Donovan had seen everything the automotive industry had to offer, and something about the way Sarah carried herself had always bothered him. Not bothered in a bad way, bothered like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit where everyone assumed it belonged. He'd been watching her for months, noting the way she moved around vehicles with the unconscious awareness of someone who'd spent serious time evaluating escape routes and defensive positions. Mechanics learned to respect the machines, but they didn't scan doorways before entering or position themselves with clear sight lines to all entrances. They didn't check reflective surfaces to monitor people behind them or maintain the physical readiness of someone who trusted their life to their reflexes. "You know," Donovan said quietly to his assistant, Megan Reynolds, "that woman knows more about protection than she lets on." Reynolds glanced toward Sarah, who was now performing a routine inspection on a Mercedes engine. "What makes you say that, Frank?" "Watch her movements," Donovan replied. "She's not just checking for mechanical issues. She's constantly aware of everyone in the room, tracking movements without being obvious about it. That's not mechanic thinking. That's security thinking." Donovan had no idea he was watching one of the most decorated close protection specialists in government history, someone whose classified missions had been studied in security academies around the world. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As if sensing their attention, Sarah looked up and met Donovan's eyes across the garage. For just a moment, he saw something flicker in her expression, a depth of knowledge and experience that seemed impossible for someone with her official record. Then it was gone, replaced by the familiar mask of professional competence. The rest of the day passed in routine maintenance tasks, but Donovan couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Sarah Mitchell than anyone realized. He'd seen enough security professionals to know that sometimes the most dangerous people were the ones who worked hardest to appear ordinary. That evening, as Sarah packed up her tools and prepared to leave for her small apartment in the suburbs, she didn't notice Donovan making a discreet phone call to someone in the security industry. She was too busy trying not to think about the photograph hidden in her nightstand drawer, 5 operatives in tactical gear, standing in front of an unmarked helicopter with Phoenix Unit stenciled on the side. She was in the center of that photograph, the only woman, the youngest face, wearing team leader insignia. 4 of those operatives were dead now. She was the only survivor of Phoenix Unit, and the only one who remembered what it felt like to be truly alive in the field. But tomorrow would be another day of routine maintenance. Another day of being invisible. Another day of pretending that the most dangerous thing she'd ever done was replace a timing belt. The young mechanics would continue their jokes, never knowing that the woman they called Wrench Witch had once been the most feared close protection specialist in the entire security sector. Some secrets were worth keeping. Some legends were safer in the shadows. At least that's what she told herself every night when she lay awake listening to the sound of police sirens in the distance and remembering what it felt like to make a difference. The web of suspicion tightens. The anonymous email arrived in Robert Hudson's inbox at 6:30 a.m. marked Urgent Personnel Inquiry. The subject line read, Maintenance Technician Mitchell Background Verification Required. Hudson frowned as he opened the message. It was professionally written but unsigned, requesting a comprehensive review of Sarah Mitchell's employment record. The sender claimed to have concerns about potential security clearance discrepancies and suggested that Mitchell might have access to classified training beyond her authorization level. What bothered Hudson most wasn't the email itself, anonymous. Tips weren't uncommon in businesses with high-value clients. What bothered him was the timing. 3 days earlier, he'd received a similar inquiry from Shop Security, triggered by Donovan's phone call to an old contact in the private security sector, Meanwhile, Sarah was having the worst morning of her 15-year exile. The diagnostic computer for the European imports had crashed overnight, leaving her with no way to run the mandatory systems checks required before the day's scheduled services. Without those checks, the entire service schedule would be delayed by at least 4 hours. Derek Williams appeared at her shoulder like a bad omen. "What's the holdup, wrench witch?" "We've got a full service schedule today." "Computer system failure," Sarah replied, not looking up from the manual reboot sequence she was attempting. "I'm working on it." Williams's voice carried the particular edge of a supervisor whose schedule had been disrupted. "Work faster. We've got the mayor's car coming in next week, and Hudson wants everything running perfectly." Sarah's fingers paused over the keyboard. She knew exactly what was wrong with the system. A corrupted driver file that would take the IT department 3 hours to identify and fix. She also knew a workaround that could have the system operational in 15 minutes, but it would require accessing administrative protocols that maintenance technicians weren't supposed to know existed. This was the moment she'd been dreading for 15 years, when her expertise would expose her true identity. "How long?" Williams pressed. "Standard protocol says I need to wait for IT support. Could be 3 to 4 hours. 3 to 4 hours? Williams's voice rose loud enough to attract attention from across the garage. "That's unacceptable. We have million-dollar vehicles sitting idle because you can't fix a computer." Tyler Brooks joined the conversation, his young face flushed with indignation. "This is exactly why women don't belong in critical positions. When the pressure's on, they can't handle it." The comment hung in the air like exhaust fumes. Sarah felt every eye in the garage turn toward her, waiting to see how she'd respond to the blatant challenge. She could hear the whispered conversations. Starting, the subtle shift in atmosphere that happened when professional competence became a gender issue. "I'm following standard safety protocols," she said evenly. "Vehicle systems checks can't be rushed." Williams stepped closer, his voice dropping to a tone that somehow managed to be both private and public. "Listen, Mitchell, I don't know what kind of maintenance experience you had before coming here, but this is a premium service center. We don't have time for by-the-book procedures when there are workarounds available." "There are no authorized workarounds for the system," Sarah replied, which was technically true. The workaround she knew about wasn't in any manual. "Then maybe you're not the right person for this job," Brooks added. "Maybe we need someone who can think outside the box when the situation demands it." Sarah looked up from the computer screen, her brown eyes meeting Brooks's gaze with steady calm. If only he knew he was challenging someone who had once improvised tactics that became standard procedure for the entire security industry. "You want me to compromise vehicle safety protocols to accommodate a service schedule?" "I want you to do whatever it takes to get our cars back on the road," Williams said. "That's what we pay you for." The conversation was attracting more attention now. Other mechanics were gathering, along with office personnel and parts runners. Sarah realized she was being put on display, her competence questioned in front of everyone who mattered in the shop. She could feel the weight of their expectations, the unspoken assumption that she would either perform a miracle or prove herself inadequate. It was a no-win situation, carefully constructed by people who'd never had to make life or death decisions in the span of a heartbeat. "I'll see what I can do," she said finally. Sarah turned back to the computer, her fingers moving across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. She accessed the system's diagnostic mode, bypassed the corrupted driver through a backdoor protocol, and manually initiated the vehicle interface sequence. The screen flickered twice, then displayed the familiar green status indicators. "Systems online," she announced. "You can begin your service checks." The garage erupted in surprised murmurs. Williams stared at the screen, his expression shifting from irritation to confusion to something that might have been suspicion. "How did you do that?" he asked. "Experience," Sarah replied, already moving toward the next vehicle. But Donovan was watching from the shadows again, and this time he wasn't the only one taking notes. Megan Reynolds had filmed the entire exchange on her phone, supposedly for training purposes. The timestamp would show that Sarah had accomplished in 12 minutes what should have taken the IT department 4 hours. As the mechanics dispersed to begin their delayed service schedule, Donovan approached Sarah with a maintenance request form. "Need you to sign off on this inspection," he said casually. But when Sarah looked at the form, she realized it wasn't a routine maintenance request. It was a security clearance verification, requesting confirmation of her technical certifications and system access levels. "Frank, I'm not authorized to sign clearance verifications," she said. "According to the system, you accessed administrative protocols this morning," Donovan replied quietly. "That requires Level 2 security clearance. Your file says you're Level 1. Sarah felt the first real flutter of panic she'd experienced in 15 years. The system was malfunctioning. "I used standard troubleshooting procedures." "No, you didn't," Donovan said, not unkindly. "I've been fixing automotive computers for 30 years. What you did this morning was advanced systems administration. That's not maintenance work. That's the kind of knowledge that comes from specialized training." Their eyes met across the form, and Sarah saw something that frightened her more than armed assailants ever had: recognition. Donovan knew she was hiding something, and he wasn't going to let it go. "I learned some things in my previous assignment," she said carefully. "Your previous assignment was vehicle maintenance at Crosstown Motors," Donovan replied. "I checked. They don't teach advanced computer systems there." Sarah signed the form without another word, but her hand was shaking slightly as she walked away. She could feel Donovan's eyes following her, could sense the questions multiplying in his mind like hairline cracks in a cylinder head under stress. That evening, she sat in her small apartment and stared at the hidden photograph for the first time in months. 5 operatives in tactical gear, young and confident and completely unaware that 4 of them would be dead within a year. She'd thought she could hide forever. She'd thought her secret was safe in the classified files that only 3 people had ever read. But secrets had a way of revealing themselves when you least expected it, especially when you were too good at your job. The phone rang, startling her out of her reverie. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize, but the voice was familiar. "Sarah, this is Robert Hudson. I need to see you in my office first thing tomorrow morning. We need to discuss your employment record." The line went dead, leaving Sarah alone with the growing certainty that her 15 years of hiding were about to come to an end. The truth begins to surface. Robert Hudson's office felt smaller than usual when Sarah entered at 8 a.m. sharp. The walls were lined with awards, photographs of exotic cars, and a massive company logo that seemed to dominate the space. Hudson sat behind his desk, a thick manila folder spread open before him. "Sit down, Mitchell," he said without looking up. Sarah remained standing. "Sir, if this is about yesterday's computer issue, I followed all safety protocols. This isn't about the computer." Hudson finally looked up, his gray eyes sharp with the kind of scrutiny that made employees sweat. "This is about your background." "Check." The folder contained her official employment record, but Sarah could see additional documents clipped to the inside cover. Someone had been digging deeper than the standard personnel files, and she was running out of places to hide. "When you transferred to Hudson's auto shop 5 years ago, you listed your previous employment as vehicle maintenance at Crosstown Motors," Hudson continued. "But Crosstown has no record of your advanced computer systems training. In fact, they have no record of you receiving any specialized technical education beyond basic mechanical maintenance." Sarah kept her expression neutral. "I've always been good with computers, sir. Self-taught mostly." "Self-taught?" Hudson picked up a printed report from the folder. "According to Megan Reynolds' documentation, You accessed Level 2 administrative protocols yesterday morning. That's not self-taught capability. That's specialized training that requires months of coursework and security clearance. The trap was closing with corporate precision. Sarah realized that Reynolds hadn't just been filming for training purposes. She'd been documenting evidence of security protocol violations. Sir, the system was malfunctioning. I used standard troubleshooting procedures. Hudson leaned back in his chair, studying her face. Mitchell, I've been in the automotive industry for 25 years. I've seen every kind of cover-up, every kind of lie, and every kind of half-truth that people use to hide their mistakes. But you're not lying to me. You're hiding something much bigger. Before Sarah could respond, the office door opened. Donovan entered, carrying another folder that looked suspiciously official. Robert, you wanted to see this? Donovan said, placing the folder on Hudson's desk. Hudson opened it and read for several long moments. His expression shifted from skepticism to confusion to something that might have been recognition. Mitchell, he said slowly, this is a classified personnel inquiry I submitted to several contacts yesterday. I asked them to verify your complete employment history, including any records that might be above my clearance level. Sarah felt her heart rate increase. Sir, I don't understand. The response is interesting, Hudson continued. They confirmed that you've been serving as a maintenance technician for 15 years, but they also note that your personnel file contains classified sections that require a Level 4 security clearance to access. 6 armed men just entered the customer lounge. They've taken hostages and they're demanding access to the diplomat's vehicle in Bay 3. Hudson grabbed the security phone. Control room, what's the status on the customer lounge? The phone crackled with static. Sir, we lost contact with reception 5 minutes ago. Security cameras show 6 armed individuals. They've isolated approximately 12 hostages, including 3 children. They're demanding access to the diplomatic vehicle we're servicing. Send security teams. Sir, our security team is pinned down in the north hallway. Police response. Time is estimated at 15 minutes minimum. The control room fell silent. Sarah could hear the desperation in the security officer's voice, could feel the weight of 12 innocent lives hanging in the balance. Hudson looked at her with sudden realization. Mitchell, you're the only combat-qualified professional on site right now. Sir, I haven't been in the field in 15 years. I'm not equipped. I'm not prepared. Those people don't have 15 minutes, Hudson interrupted. According to this file, you've got more close-quarters combat experience than every security officer in this building combined. Donovan stepped forward. Sarah, there are children in there. They need help now, not in 15 minutes. Sarah felt the familiar weight of command decision settling on her shoulders. It was the same feeling she'd had 32 times before, the moment when everything else faded away except the mission and the people who needed her. Sir, I'll need access to the maintenance tunnels and a full facility layout. Done, Hudson said. Donovan, get Mitchell whatever she needs. As they rushed toward the security office, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in 15 years. The electric anticipation of entering a hostile situation where she belonged. The wrench witch was about to become Phoenix Lead again. And this time she wasn't going to hide from who she really was. Return to action. The maintenance tunnels ran beneath the entire facility, providing access to utilities and emergency routes. Sarah moved through them with practiced stealth, her muscle memory returning despite 15 years of disuse. Control room. This is Mitchell, she whispered into the radio Donovan had provided. I need a current situation report. Mitchell, we show 6 armed individuals, military precision movements. They've consolidated hostages in the northeast corner of the customer lounge. They're attempting to access the service area through the main door, but our security lockdown is holding. For now. Sarah analyzed the information with the tactical precision that had once made her legendary. What's their objective? Unknown. The vehicle they're demanding belongs to the Westerian ambassador. It's in for routine maintenance. Sarah's blood ran cold. The Westerian ambassador had been involved in controversial peace negotiations. His vehicle would contain diplomatic communications, security access codes, possibly even classified materials. Control. I'm approaching the customer lounge through the utility access. I'll need a distraction when I make my move. What kind of distraction? Fire suppression system in the service area. Full activation, 30 seconds, on my mark. Sura positioned herself beneath the utility access panel that would open into the customer lounge storage closet. Through the thin ceiling, she could hear muffled voices, occasional shouts, and the terrified whimpers of children. She closed her eyes for a moment, centering herself the way she'd been trained. 15 years melted away. She was Phoenix Lead. Again, with people depending on her. Control, this is Mitchell, Mark. The distant alarm blared as the fire suppression system activated in the service area. Sarah heard confused shouts from the customer lounge as the armed men tried to understand this new development. With practiced efficiency, she removed the access panel and pulled herself up into the storage closet. Through the slats in the door, she could see the customer lounge. 6 men in tactical gear, armed with military-grade weapons. 12 hostages, huddled in the corner, including 3 children. 5 of the men were focused on the door to the service area, trying to determine if the alarm signaled a new threat. The 6th remained watching the hostages, his weapon trained on a young mother clutching her child. Sarah assessed the situation in seconds. The immediate threat was the man watching the hostages. The other 5 were temporarily distracted. She had perhaps 10 seconds before they realized the alarm was a diversion. She moved. The storage door opened silently as Sarah slipped into the room. The man guarding the hostages never saw her coming. She crossed the distance in 3 silent steps, disabled him with a precision strike to the neck, and lowered his unconscious form to the ground before he could make a sound. 1 down, 5 to go. The hostages saw her, eyes widening in recognition and confusion. The maintenance technician they knew as quiet, unassuming Sarah was moving with the lethal grace of a trained operative. Sarah put her finger to her lips, signaling silence, then moved toward the 5 remaining threats. They were still focused on the service area door, discussing how to breach it. Control, cut power to the customer lounge, now. The lights went out. In the sudden darkness, Sarah moved. The first man fell before he could react, a precise strike rendering him unconscious. The second turned at the sound, raising his weapon, but Sarah was already inside his guard. She disarmed him with a fluid motion, using his own momentum to send him crashing into the third attacker. Both went down hard. The 4th and 5th men opened fire, muzzle flashes illuminating the darkness. Sarah was no longer there, having anticipated their response. She flanked them from the left, disabling the 4th man with a sweeping leg strike that sent him to the floor, his weapon clattering away. The 5th man turned toward her, but she was too close too fast. A precise combination of strikes left him unconscious beside his companions. The 3rd man was struggling to his feet. Sarah closed the distance and delivered a final neutralizing blow. 6 armed men, neutralized in 30 seconds. As the emergency lights activated, bathing the room in a soft red glow, the hostages stared in disbelief. The quiet mechanic they'd barely noticed had just taken down 6 armed professionals with military efficiency. Sarah moved quickly, securing weapons and restraining the unconscious men with zip ties from the storage closet. She checked each hostage, ensuring no one was injured, speaking in the calm, reassuring tone that had once been her professional signature. "You're safe now. The police will be here soon. Everything's going to be okay." A young mother clutching her son looked up at Sarah with tear-filled eyes. Who are you? Before Sarah could answer, the security doors burst open. Police tactical units flooded in, weapons raised, shouting commands. Behind them came Hudson and Donovan, their faces showing matching expressions of disbelief and awe. As the police secured the scene and began processing the hostages, Hudson approached Sarah. "Mitchell, what you just did." "Just doing my job, sir," she replied quietly. "Like hell you were," Hudson said, his voice low with emotion. "You just saved 12 lives in there." The police said these men were professional mercenaries, possibly linked to a terrorist cell targeting diplomatic personnel. No ordinary security team could have handled this. Sarah looked toward the hostages being escorted to safety, focusing on the children now reunited with their parents. "Sometimes being ordinary is overrated, sir." The legend returns. When the police finally finished their interviews and departed, half the staff had gathered in the main service area. Word had spread quickly. The quiet maintenance technician had single-handedly neutralized 6 armed attackers and saved 12 hostages. As Sarah walked through the garage toward the locker room, she found Derek Williams and his crew waiting. Their faces showed a mixture of disbelief, embarrassment, and newfound respect. "Mitchell," Williams began, his usual confidence noticeably absent. "What you did today, I don't even know what to say." Sarah looked at the young mechanic, seeing in his face the same arrogance she had once possessed before life taught her humility. "You don't need to say anything, Derek. Just remember that appearances can be deceiving." Tyler Brooks pushed forward, his young face serious. "Sarah, is it true what they're saying? That you were some kind of special agent?" Sarah studied his face, young, eager, and completely unprepared for the realities of the world she had once inhabited. "What I was isn't important. What matters is that everyone is safe." As the crowd began to disperse, Hudson pulled Sarah aside. "Mitchell, I understand now why you chose to maintain a low profile. But what you did today, that's going to change things. The police report will be classified at the highest levels. The incident with the diplomatic vehicle will be contained. But the people here saw what you did." "I'm aware of that, sir. You can't put the genie back in the bottle. Sarah, every employee in this shop now knows that the wrench witch is actually Phoenix Lead." Sarah nodded. She'd known this moment would come eventually. The question was whether she was ready to live with the consequences of being visible again. A new beginning. That evening, she found a package outside her apartment door. Inside was a worn tactical glove, the exact type she had used in Phoenix Unit, with her original call sign embroidered on the wrist, Phoenix Lead. A handwritten note was attached. "We still need people like you. The world is more dangerous than ever. Your skills matter." Sarah held the glove but didn't put it on. Some symbols were more powerful when they remained retired, waiting for the moments when they were truly needed. The next morning, she arrived at the garage at 7 a.m. to find Brooks and 3 other young mechanics waiting for her. They stood respectfully, their faces serious and attentive. "Good morning, Sarah," Brooks said. "We heard you might be leaving. We wanted to ask if you'd be willing to teach us something first." Sarah looked at their eager faces and saw herself 15 years ago, confident, capable, and completely unaware of how much they didn't know about the realities of personal protection. "What exactly do you want to learn?" she asked quietly. "You took down 6 armed men in 30 seconds, one of the younger mechanics said, his voice filled with awe. "That's impossible." "No," Sarah replied. "It's not impossible. It's training, awareness, and preparation. It's understanding that real protection isn't about showing off or looking tough. It's about bringing everyone home safely." As she began their education in basic situational awareness and personal protection, Sarah realized that her 15 years of hiding hadn't been a waste. They had been preparation for this moment, when she could finally use her experience to prevent others from making the same mistakes that had cost Rebecca Torres her life. The agency's interest. 3 days after the incident, 2 unmarked black SUVs pulled up to the main entrance of Hudson's auto shop. The visitors wore civilian clothes but moved with the precise bearing of government agents. Their credentials identified them as representatives of the Sentinel Security Division, the same people who had spent 15 years respecting Sarah's request for anonymity. Robert Hudson met them in his office. The classified file about Sarah's intervention spread across his desk. The lead investigator, a stern woman in her 50s, introduced herself as Director Elizabeth Collins. "Mr. Hudson, we're here to conduct a comprehensive review of the incident involving Sarah Mitchell. What she accomplished was remarkable, but it's also raised some concerns at the highest levels." Hudson leaned back in his chair. "What kind of concerns?" "The kind that happen when one of our most classified operatives suddenly resurfaces and engages hostile forces without proper authorization," Collins replied. "Agent Mitchell has been inactive for 15 years. She underwent no recent training, no qualification updates, no psychological evaluation, yet she single-handedly neutralized a highly trained mercenary team." The second investigator, a younger man named Agent Marcus Reynolds, pulled out a tablet. "Our preliminary investigation shows that Agent Mitchell accessed secure areas, initiated countermeasures without proper chain of command authorization, and engaged hostile forces in what could technically be considered a security breach." Hudson felt his temper rising. "She saved 12 innocent people who were seconds away from execution. What exactly are you questioning?" "We're questioning whether someone with her psychological profile should have access to sensitive operations," Collins said. "Agent Mitchell requested transfer to civilian status after experiencing severe trauma. She's been hiding her identity for 15 years. That suggests significant psychological issues that could affect her judgment in crisis situations." "Her judgment seemed pretty solid when she was pulling terrified children out of a hostage situation," Hudson replied. Reynolds consulted his tablet. "Mr. Hudson, Agent Mitchell violated at least 12 different protocols during her intervention. She engaged hostile forces without positive identification. She operated outside her assigned jurisdiction, and she used potentially lethal force without going through proper authorization procedures. She did what was necessary to save lives." "That's exactly the problem," Collins said. "Agent Mitchell operates outside normal command structures. She makes her own rules, follows her own protocols. That makes her extremely dangerous regardless of her intentions." Hudson stood up and walked to his window overlooking the service bays. "Director Collins, are you here to investigate Sarah Mitchell, or are you here to recruit her?" The question hung in the air for several moments. Collins and Reynolds exchanged glances, some kind of silent communication passing between them. "Both," Collins finally admitted. "The Sentinel Security Division is facing a crisis. Mr. Hudson, we're losing experienced field operatives faster than we can train new ones. Budget cuts are forcing us to reduce training programs just when international threats are increasing. We need people like Sarah Mitchell. But we also need people who can follow orders," Reynolds added. "Agent Mitchell has demonstrated that. She's willing to ignore chain of command when she thinks the situation requires it. That's problematic for operational discipline." Hudson turned back to face them. "What exactly are you proposing?" Collins opened a briefcase and pulled out another classified folder. "We want to offer Agent Mitchell a position with the Sentinel Security Training Division. It's a small, elite group of instructors who handle specialized training for field operatives who face exceptional threats. Essentially, we want her to do officially what she's been doing unofficially," Reynolds explained. "Operating outside normal protocols, teaching others how to handle situations that conventional training doesn't cover, maintaining operational effectiveness while delivering exceptional results." Hudson studied the folder. "And if she refuses?" "Then she returns to maintenance duties," and we pretend this conversation never happened," Collins said. "But Mr. Hudson, we both know that's not a sustainable solution. Agent Mitchell is too skilled to waste on engine repairs, and after what happened this week, she's too visible to maintain her cover." The vanishing act. Before Hudson could respond, there was a knock on his office door. Donovan entered, his expression grim. "Robert, we've got a problem. Sarah Mitchell didn't report for duty this morning. Her apartment manager says she packed up and left sometime during the night. No forwarding address, no contact information." Collins and Reynolds looked at each other with alarm. "She ran?" Reynolds asked. "Looks that way," Donovan confirmed. "Left a note saying she was taking emergency leave and would be in touch when she was ready." Hudson felt a sinking sensation in his stomach. Any idea where she might have gone? "Her personnel file lists a sister in Montana, but we called, and she hasn't heard from Sarah in months." Collins stood up abruptly. "Gentlemen, we have a serious security issue. Agent Mitchell has access to classified information about current operations, and she's just disappeared without authorization. This is now a matter of national security." Reynolds was already on his phone, calling in resources. "I'm initiating a federal search. We'll have her located within 24 hours. But Hudson was thinking about his conversation with Sarah, about the way she'd looked when she talked about preferring to serve in the shadows. He had a feeling that if Phoenix Lead didn't want to be found, she wouldn't be. In the Montana wilderness, meanwhile, 300 miles away, Sarah was sitting in a small roadside diner reading news, reports about the security incident that had resulted in 12 hostages being rescued. The official story made no mention of her involvement, just a brief statement about security personnel resolving the situation with minimal force. It was exactly the kind of careful cover-up that she'd expected. Her phone buzzed with another call from an unknown number. She'd been getting them all morning, probably Sentinel agents trying to track her down. She turned off the phone and paid for her coffee. The truth was, she hadn't run because she was afraid of the agency's offer. She'd run because she was afraid she might accept it. The feeling of being back in action, of using her skills to save lives, of finally being who she really was. It had been intoxicating. But she'd learned 15 years ago that being Phoenix Lead came with a price. People followed her into danger, trusted her judgment, depended on her skills, and sometimes, despite her best efforts, they died. She wasn't sure she was ready to carry that weight again. But as she drove through the Montana wilderness, she couldn't shake the memory of Brooks and the other young mechanics waiting for her, eager to learn from someone who understood the realities of personal protection. Maybe running away wasn't the answer. Maybe it was time to stop hiding from who she was and start using her experience to make sure the next generation was better prepared than she had been. The phone she'd bought that morning rang. This time she answered it. "Agent Mitchell, this is Director Elizabeth Collins. We need to talk." The final choice. Director Collins's voice was calm but firm. "Agent Mitchell, you have 24 hours to report to Sentinel headquarters in Arlington. After that, your disappearance becomes a federal fugitive matter." Sarah pulled over at a scenic overlook, the weight of 15 years of running finally catching up with her. "Director, with respect, I never asked to be dragged back into this world." "No, but the world needs you in it," Collins replied. "Sarah, I've been protecting your secret for 15 years because I believed you needed time to heal. But what happened at Hudson's auto shop proves that you're ready to serve again." "Ma'am, I saved 12 people. That doesn't mean I'm ready to be responsible for an entire team again. It means you're exactly who we need for the job I'm offering." Collins's voice softened slightly. "Sarah, I'm not asking you to lead field operations. I'm asking you to train the next generation of operatives so they don't make the same mistakes that cost Rebecca Torres her life." The mention of Rebecca's name hit Sarah like a physical blow. "Director, that's not fair. Fairness has nothing to do with it. Rebecca died because your team wasn't properly prepared for the situation you encountered. You've spent 15 years carrying that guilt, but instead of letting it destroy you, you can use it to save other operatives. Sarah stared at the Montana landscape, thinking about Brooks and the other young mechanics who had been waiting for her. Guidance. They were eager, confident, and completely unprepared for the realities of personal protection, just like she had been, just like Rebecca had been. What exactly are you offering, ma'am? Command of the Sentinel Training Institute. In Virginia. You'll work directly with operative candidates who show exceptional promise, but need advanced tactical training. Your job will be to turn good agents into great agents, and great agents into survivors. Sarah closed her eyes. And if I refuse? Then you go back to hiding, and I find someone else to train operatives who will inevitably face situations they're not prepared for. How many Rebecca Torreses are you willing to accept to maintain your anonymity? The question hung in the air like smoke from a firefight. Sarah realized that Collins was right. She'd been selfish in her grief, hiding her knowledge and experience while other operatives faced the same dangers that had killed her teammates. I'll be there in 18 hours, she said finally. The Training Institute. Sentinel headquarters was a sprawling complex of modernistic buildings nestled against the Virginia countryside. When Sarah arrived, she was met by a young lieutenant who looked barely old enough to qualify for field duty. Agent Mitchell, I'm Lieutenant Daniel Torres. Director Collins is waiting for you in the briefing room. Sarah felt her heart skip a beat at the name. Torres? Any relation to Rebecca Torres? The young man smiled slightly. Her younger brother. She's the reason I joined Sentinel. As they walked through the facility, Sarah noticed the intensity of the training operations. Operatives were conducting simulated protection exercises, practicing extraction techniques, and running through crisis scenarios with the kind of focus that suggested they knew their lives would depend on getting it right. Director Collins was standing in front of a large tactical display when Sarah entered the briefing room. She was older than Sarah had expected, with silver hair and the kind of weathered face that came from decades of making life or death decisions. Agent Mitchell, thank you for coming. Director Collins. I'm here, but I want to understand exactly what you're asking me to do. Collins gestured to the tactical display, which showed a map of global hotspots where Sentinel operatives were currently deployed. We're facing the most challenging operational environment in decades. Advanced weapon systems, sophisticated electronic surveillance, hostile forces with training that rivals our own. The tactics that worked 15 years ago will get our operatives killed today. She pressed a button, and the display changed to show casualty statistics. We're losing experienced field agents faster than we can replace them. The operatives we're sending into the field are technically proficient, but they lack the tactical instincts that come from real-world experience. That's where you come in, Collins continued. Your operational record is unparalleled. 32 missions. 0 civilian casualties until the final engagement. You understand how to survive in situations where other operatives fail. Sarah studied the statistics. Director, I've been out of the field for 15 years. The technology has changed. The threats have evolved. The fundamentals haven't changed, Collins interrupted. Good operatives live, bad operatives die. And the difference is usually measured in split-second decisions, based on experience and instinct. That's what you bring to the table. Collins pulled out a chair and sat down across from Sarah. I'm not asking you to run field operations. I'm asking you to teach other operatives how to survive them. Take everything you learned in Phoenix Unit, every mistake, every success, every hard-won piece of knowledge, and pass it on to the next generation. What about your investigators? They seem to think I was a security risk. Collins smiled grimly. Agents Reynolds and Morris work for me. Their job was to evaluate whether you were psychologically stable enough to handle this assignment. Disappearing for 3 days wasn't ideal, but it proved that you're still capable of evading detection when necessary. That's actually a valuable skill for this position. Sarah felt the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. This was all planned, wasn't it? The investigation, the job offer, even my intervention at Hudson's? The hostage situation was real, and you saved 12 lives, Collins replied. But yes, we've been looking for the right opportunity to bring you back. Sentinel needs what you have to offer, and frankly, I think you need this as much as we do. Collins stood up and walked to the window overlooking the training grounds. Sarah, you've been hiding from your past for 15 years, but your past is what makes you valuable. Rebecca Torres died, but the lessons you learned from her death can save dozens of other operatives. What if I fail? What if the operatives I train make the same mistakes anyway? Then you'll have done everything you could to prepare them. That's all any of us can do. Collins turned back to face her. The alternative is to let them learn through trial and error, and we both know how that usually ends. Sarah thought about Derek Williams and Tyler Brooks, about their casual confidence and complete ignorance of the dangers they would eventually face. She thought about Rebecca Torres dying alone in a firefight while covering Sarah's extraction. She thought about 15 years of maintenance work, 15 years of hiding her knowledge while others made preventable mistakes. Director, I have one condition. Name it. I want complete autonomy over training methods and curriculum. No interference from bureaucrats who think they understand field operations but have never been shot at. Collins smiled. Done. You'll report directly to me, and I'll handle any political complications that arise. Sarah stood up and extended her hand. When do I start? Tomorrow. Your first class consists of 12 operatives who've been selected for advanced tactical training. They're all technically proficient, but they need someone to teach them how to think like field agents. As they shook hands, Collins added, Sarah, welcome back to the war. 6 months later, Sarah sat in her new office and opened a file containing profiles of her first graduates. 12 young operatives, all eager to prove themselves, all confident in their abilities, all completely unaware of how much they'd grown under her guidance. She thought about Rebecca Torres, about the price of inadequate preparation, about the responsibility of turning these young agents into survivors. For the first time in 15 years, Sarah Mitchell felt like she was exactly where she belonged. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the same briefing room where Director Collins had convinced her to return to active duty, but this time she wasn't alone. 12 operatives in tactical gear sat at attention, their faces bearing the kind of focused intensity that came from training under someone who had actually survived everything they were learning to face. Lieutenant Daniel Torres raised his hand. Agent Mitchell, permission to speak. Granted. I wanted to thank you for what you taught us about situational awareness last week during the red flag exercise. I detected an approaching threat that the security systems missed. The techniques you showed us about reading crowd dynamics and anticipating attacks probably saved my team's life. Sarah nodded, feeling a familiar mixture of pride and responsibility. That's exactly why we train, Lieutenant. Real protection isn't about following protocols. It's about recognizing danger before it becomes lethal. Agent Jessica Foster, one of the few women in the program, spoke up. Agent Mitchell, what you said about trusting your instincts, even when the technology disagrees, that really resonated with me. In standard training, we're taught to trust the equipment over our feelings, but in the field, sometimes your gut knows things that sensors can't detect. Your equipment can be compromised, damaged, or fooled, Sarah replied. Your instincts are harder to deceive if you train them properly. She walked to the tactical display and brought up a mission scenario. Today's exercise is based on a real operation from 2010. Phoenix. Unit was tasked with protecting a high-value diplomat moving through an urban environment. Intelligence suggested light resistance, minimal threat capability. The operatives leaned forward, recognizing this as one of Sarah's actual missions. She rarely shared details from her service record, but when she did, it was always to illustrate a crucial lesson. What actually happened was a sophisticated ambush. The hostile forces had positioned snipers in concealed locations, used civilian crowds to mask their approach, and set up the motorcade route as a kill zone. She pressed a button, and the display showed the tactical situation as it had actually unfolded. My second-in-command, Agent Torres, detected the trap before I did. She called for an immediate route change and began evacuation procedures. I should have listened to her. The briefing room was completely silent. Everyone knew this was the mission that had cost Rebecca Torres her life and ended Sarah's field career. Instead, I pressed forward with the original plan. I thought I knew better. I thought my experience and training made me invulnerable. Sarah's voice remained steady, but the weight of 15 years of guilt was evident. Torres died covering our extraction. She died because I was too arrogant to listen to good advice from someone with less experience. Lieutenant Torres spoke carefully. Ma'am, from what we've studied, your decision was tactically sound based on the intelligence available at the time. That's exactly the kind of thinking that gets operatives killed, Sarah replied sharply. Tactics change. Intelligence is often wrong, and the enemy gets a vote in how every operation unfolds. The moment you think you have everything figured out is the moment you become vulnerable. She turned back to the display. The lesson here isn't about specific tactics or procedures. It's about humility. No matter how experienced you become, no matter how many successful missions you complete, you're always one mistake away from disaster. The final mission. After the operatives were dismissed, Director Collins entered the briefing room. How are they progressing? Better than I expected, Sarah replied. Torres shows real promise. He's got good instincts, and he's not afraid to question assumptions. Foster is technically excellent and thinks strategically. The whole group is starting to gel as a unit. Any concerns? Sarah considered the question. They're all still a little too eager to prove themselves. That's natural at their experience level, but it's also dangerous. Field operations aren't about heroics. They're about completing the mission and bringing everyone home. Collins pulled out a folder marked with classification stamps. Speaking of missions, we've got a request from the State Department. They want to borrow some of our advanced tactical training graduates for a protection detail in Eastern Europe. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. These operatives aren't ready for high-risk field operations. They need at least 6 more months of training. I agree, but the operational commanders are pressuring us to accelerate the program. They need experienced agents now, not next year. Director, with respect, that's exactly the kind of pressure that led to Torres's death. Rushing operatives into the field before they're ready is a recipe for casualties. Collins closed the folder. I told State the same thing. Our operatives graduate when you say they're ready, not when some staff officer decides he needs warm bodies on protection detail. Sarah felt a wave of relief. Thank you, ma'am. Don't thank me yet. There's something else. Collins walked to the window. Sentinel is creating a new elite response unit, the Rapid Deployment Team. They want you to command it. Ma'am, I'm happy where I am. Training operatives is important work. It is. But this would be training and leading the best operatives in Sentinel. Handpicked volunteers, unlimited resources, missions that other units can't handle. Collins turned back to face her. It's a chance to build the kind of team that could have prevented what happened to Torres. Sarah thought about her current students, about the responsibility of command, about the weight of other people's lives hanging on her decisions. I need time to consider it. Take all the time you need. But Sarah, you spent 15 years hiding from leadership. Maybe it's time to embrace it. That evening, Sarah walked out to the training grounds and stood in the empty combat simulation area. The facility was state-of-the-art, representing the pinnacle of security training technology. In the right hands, it was an invaluable tool for preparing operatives. In the wrong hands, it was just another expensive way to give agents a false sense of security. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Lieutenant Torres. "Agent Mitchell, thank you for everything you've taught us. Whatever you decide about the new command, know that you've already made a difference. My sister would be proud." Sarah smiled, feeling something she hadn't experienced since before Rebecca's death: peace with her past and hope for the future. She'd spent 15 years carrying the guilt of one operative's death. Maybe it was time to focus on preventing future deaths instead of dwelling on past failures. She pulled out her phone and typed a message to Director Collins. "Ma'am, I accept the command position. When do we start?" The response came back immediately. "Welcome to the Rapid Deployment Team. Commander Mitchell. Your promotion papers are already in process." Commander Mitchell. After 15 years of hiding behind maintenance coveralls and false modesty, Sarah was ready to embrace who she really was, one of the finest field operatives in Sentinel history. And perhaps more importantly, one of the best teachers the agency had ever produced. The legend of Phoenix Lead was entering its final chapter, but this time the story wouldn't end with tragedy. This time it would end with dozens of young operatives who were better prepared, better trained, and better equipped to survive the dangers of modern field operations. Rebecca's death had taught Sarah about the price of failure. Now it was time to teach others about the value of excellence. As she walked back toward the main building, Sarah thought about the photo she'd kept hidden for 15 years. 5 operatives, standing confidently in front of their helicopter, unaware of the dangers ahead. Soon she'd have dozens of new photos showing operatives who understood those dangers and were prepared to face them. The wrench witch was finally ready to stop haunting the shadows and step back into the light. Some legends hide in plain sight, waiting for the moment when the world needs them most. For 15 years, Sarah Mitchell had been that hidden legend. Now as Commander Mitchell, she was ready to create new legends, operatives who would carry on the tradition of excellence that had made Phoenix Unit famous, but with the wisdom to avoid the mistakes that had made them martyrs. The field was vast, dangerous, and unforgiving, but it belonged to those who respected its power while refusing to surrender their mission. Commander Sarah Mitchell was ready to serve again, and this time she wouldn't be serving alone. "I understand. You'd like me to proceed with part 4 of the story about Sarah Mitchell, following the same guidelines as before. Here's the final part of the story, the test of command." 1 year into her role as commander of the Rapid Deployment Team, Sarah Mitchell stood in the Sentinel Command Center watching a crisis unfold in real time. The wall-sized screens displayed satellite imagery, communications data, and status updates from her team currently operating in eastern Ukraine. Deployment Team Alpha reports extraction complete. All diplomatic personnel secured. Moving to primary evacuation point, the communications officer announced. Sarah nodded, studying the tactical display with the practiced eye of someone who had spent decades evaluating threats. Her team, consisting of 12 operatives she had personally trained, was conducting a high-risk extraction of diplomatic personnel from an embassy under siege. Commander Mitchell, satellite shows 3 vehicles approaching the evacuation point from the north. Unknown affiliations, the intelligence analyst reported. Sarah processed the information instantly. Redirect Alpha Team to secondary evacuation. Point, alert air support to adjust pickup coordinates. "But ma'am, the primary route has already been secured," Lieutenant Marcus Reynolds, her operations deputy, questioned. "Protocol indicates." "Protocol assumes perfect intelligence," Sarah interrupted calmly. "Those vehicles are moving too." "Precisely. This isn't random traffic." The command center fell silent as her team processed the order. Sarah had built her reputation on these moments, the ability to sense danger before it materialized, to change course when everyone else Saw only the established plan. Alpha team acknowledges. Redirecting to secondary evacuation point, the communications officer confirmed. 10 minutes later, the primary evacuation point erupted in gunfire as the 3 unknown vehicles deployed armed combatants. The attack hit empty air. Sarah's team was already 3 kilometers away, moving safely toward their alternate extraction. Director Collins entered the command center, surveying the tactical display with approval. "Good call, Commander. How did you know?" Sarah's eyes remained on the screen, tracking her team's movement. The pattern was wrong. Local traffic is chaotic, especially during a crisis. Those vehicles moved with military precision, equidistant spacing, consistent speed, optimal approach angles. Someone trained them. Collins nodded. "That's exactly why you're in that chair. The instincts that can't be taught." Sarah turned to face her. "Everything can be taught, Director. It just requires the right teacher." The burden of responsibility. Later that evening, Sarah sat alone in her office, reviewing the mission debrief. The extraction had been a complete success. 18 diplomatic personnel safely evacuated. 0 casualties, minimal engagement with hostile forces. A year ago, she would have considered this a perfect operation. Now as commander, she saw a dozen ways it could have been improved. Communications that were seconds too slow, tactical positions that left minor vulnerabilities, contingency plans that hadn't been fully developed. A knock on her door interrupted her analysis. Lieutenant Daniel Torres entered, still wearing his tactical gear from the field operation. "Commander, permission to speak freely?" "Always, Lieutenant." Torres sat down across from her desk. "The team is wondering why you're not celebrating with us. This was our 10th consecutive successful mission. We just evacuated 18 people from an active war zone without firing a single shot." Sarah leaned back in her chair. "You're right to be proud. The team performed exceptionally, but exceptional isn't perfect, and in our line of work, the gap between exceptional and perfect is measured in lives." Torres studied her face. "Permission to speak very freely, ma'am. Go ahead. You're doing it again. The same thing that happened with my sister. You're carrying too much responsibility alone." Sarah felt her chest tighten at the mention of Rebecca Torres. Even after all these years, the wound remained raw. "Daniel, your sister died because I missed critical signs of an ambush. I was the team leader. The responsibility was mine. And now you're trying to see every possible danger for every team member at every moment," Torres replied. "That's not leadership, Commander. That's martyrdom." Sarah stared at him, surprised by his directness. "What Rebecca taught us in training, what you've reinforced every day, is that survival depends on the team, not just the leader." Torres continued. "You've built an elite unit where every operative can think independently, adapt to changing threats, and support their teammates. But you still act like you need to protect everyone yourself." The words hit Sarah like physical blows, each one exposing the truth she'd been avoiding for years. She'd returned to service to teach others, but she was still clinging to the illusion of control that had cost Rebecca her life. "What would you suggest, Lieutenant?" "Trust us the way we trust you," Torres said simply. "The lessons you've taught us, they've taken root. Sometimes you need to let us apply them without you hovering over every decision." After Torres left, Sarah remained at her desk, his words echoing in her mind. Had she replaced one form of hiding with another? Instead of hiding her skills behind a mechanic's coveralls, was she now hiding from true leadership behind a wall of hyper-control? The ultimate test. 3 weeks later, Sarah found herself facing the scenario she'd feared since accepting command. A mission so critical that failure wasn't an option, yet so dangerous that casualties seemed inevitable. The tactical display showed a hospital in Damascus under siege by extremist forces. Inside were 32 patients, 14 medical staff, and the reason for Sentinel's involvement 3 undercover operatives, who had been gathering intelligence on weapons trafficking. The Syrian government forces can't reach them in time, Director Collins explained to the assembled command staff. By the time a military response is organized, the hospital will be overrun. We have a 3-hour window to extract our people. And the civilians? Sarah asked, already knowing the answer. Our priority is the operatives, Collins replied, though her expression showed she took no pleasure in the calculus of lives. The diplomatic complications of a direct Sentinel intervention are significant. We've been authorized to extract our people only. Sarah studied the tactical display, her mind racing through scenarios, evaluating approaches, calculating risks. The extremists had established a perimeter around the hospital, with approximately 40 fighters using civilian buildings for cover. A direct assault would result in a bloodbath. Commander Mitchell, your assessment? Collins prompted. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to Sarah. Her reputation had been built on making impossible decisions in moments like this. The conventional approach would be a precision strike team, fast insertion, locate our operatives, immediate extraction. Minimize engagement with hostile forces. Accept the loss of civilian lives as unfortunate collateral damage. Collins nodded grimly. That's the operational directive from above. Sarah looked around the room at the faces of her team, men and women she had trained, who trusted her judgment implicitly. She saw in Daniel Torres's eyes the unspoken question. Would she fall back on protocol, or would she find another way? Director, I'm requesting operational autonomy for this mission. My team will extract all personnel from that hospital, our operatives, the medical staff, and the patients. The room erupted in surprised murmurs. Collins's expression remained neutral, but her eyes showed concern. Commander, that's well beyond our authorization. The logistics alone are complex but manageable, Sarah interrupted. We've trained for mass casualty extraction. My team can do this. The risk to your operatives will increase exponentially, Collins warned. The risk is mine to accept, Sarah replied. But more importantly, it's my team's choice to make. She turned to face your assembled team leaders. This mission will be voluntary only. I won't order anyone to exceed operational parameters. But I won't leave innocent people to die if we have the ability to save them. Lieutenant Torres stood first. Phoenix team is in, Commander. One by one, each team leader stood, volunteering their units for the expanded mission. Sarah felt a swell of pride unlike anything she'd experienced in her career. This wasn't blind obedience to a superior officer. This was a choice made by professionals who shared her values. Collins watched the display with a mixture of concern and respect. You understand that if this goes badly, your career is over. If leaving those people to die is the price of my career, Director, then it's not a career worth having. Collins held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded. You have your autonomy, Commander. Bring them all home. The impossible mission. 6 hours later, Sarah stood in the command center as the operation unfolded across the tactical displays. Her innovative approach had shocked everyone. Instead of a direct assault, she had divided her forces into 5 specialized teams, each with distinct objectives. Team 1 created a diversion 3 kilometers from the hospital, drawing away nearly half the extremist forces with what appeared to be a major military assault. Team 2 infiltrated the hospital through underground maintenance tunnels, securing the interior without firing a shot. Team 3 established a secure evacuation corridor using non-lethal methods to clear civilians from the area. Team 4 prepared the patients for transport, with Sentinel medics supporting the hospital staff. Team 5 maintained a defensive perimeter, preventing remaining hostile forces from interfering. Status report, Sarah ordered, her voice calm despite the complexity of the operation unfolding. Team 2 has secured all 3 Sentinel operatives. Medical staff is preparing critical patients for transport. First evacuation vehicles are in position, the communications officer reported. Hostile forces still engaged with Team 1's diversion. Minimal presence near the hospital, the intelligence analyst added. Sarah watched as the first group of patients appeared on the video feed, being carefully loaded into transport vehicles by her operatives. The medical staff moved with practiced efficiency, prioritizing the most vulnerable patients. "Commander," the communications officer called out, "Team 2 reports a complication. Basement level has 14 additional patients on ventilators. They weren't in our initial intelligence." Sarah processed this new information. The extraction timeline was already tight. Additional critical patients would slow everything down, potentially exposing her people to greater risk. "Revise the extraction plan," she ordered without hesitation. "Team 3 will extend the security corridor. Team 5 will deploy additional personnel to assist with patient transport. Alert medical facilities at our safe location to prepare for ventilator cases. That will extend our exposure window by at least 30 minutes, her tactical officer warned. "Then we'll be exposed for 30 more minutes," Sarah replied firmly. "We're not leaving anyone behind." For the next 2 hours, Sarah directed the operation with a steady hand, adjusting tactics as new challenges emerged, reallocating resources where they were needed most. When hostile forces began to realize they'd been duped by the diversion, she authorized limited engagement to protect the evacuation corridor. Final transport vehicle clearing the security perimeter, the communications officer finally announced. All patients, medical staff, and Sentinel personnel accounted for. A cheer erupted in the command center. Sarah allowed herself a small smile but remained focused on the tactical display. "Maintain security protocols until all teams have reached safe extraction points," she ordered. "This isn't over until everyone is home." 90 minutes later, as the last Sentinel operative reported safe arrival at the extraction point, Sarah finally allowed herself to exhale. Against all odds, against direct orders, against conventional tactical wisdom, they had evacuated 46 civilians and 3 operatives from an active war zone with 0 casualties, the legacy. Director Collins entered the command center as the staff was celebrating. She observed the scene silently for a moment, then approached Sarah. 49 people evacuated, 0 casualties. Minimal engagement with hostile forces. The State Department is calling it a humanitarian miracle. Sarah nodded, too exhausted for false modesty. The team performed flawlessly. The team executed. "Your plan flawlessly," Collins corrected. "This operation will be studied in training academies for decades. You've just rewritten the book on humanitarian extraction under hostile conditions." Sarah thought about what Torres had said weeks earlier, about trusting her team, about letting go of the need to control every aspect of an operation. For the first time since Rebecca's death, she had fully embraced her role, not just as a tactical expert, but as a leader who empowered others. "The plan worked because everyone contributed," Sarah said. "Each team leader made critical decisions in the field that improved on the original concept." Collins studied her with newfound respect. "You've changed, Commander. A year ago, you would have taken full responsibility for every success and every failure. Now you're sharing the success and still taking responsibility for the risks." "I had a good teacher," Sarah replied, thinking of Daniel Torres's candid words in her office. "Well, your teaching days aren't over," Collins said, handing her a sealed folder. "The President has taken notice of today's operation. Sentinel is being expanded. We're establishing a new international response division specializing in humanitarian operations in conflict zones. They want you to lead it." Sarah opened the folder, scanning the operational directives with growing amazement. "This is unprecedented. Combining security operations with humanitarian mission parameters. Training not just operatives, but medical personnel, infrastructure specialists, negotiators. It's your vision brought to life, Collins said. What you proved today is that security operations don't have to choose between mission objectives and humanitarian principles. You found a third path. Sarah thought about her journey, from decorated operative to hidden mechanic to instructor to commander. Each phase had taught her something essential about leadership, about responsibility, about turning personal tragedy into purpose. "When do we start?" she asked. "The training facility is already being prepared. You'll have carte blanche to select your personnel and develop the curriculum. This is bigger than Sentinel now, Sarah. You're creating something entirely new." The transformation. 3 months later, Sarah stood before the first class of the International Response Division, 60 hand-picked individuals from military, medical, and humanitarian backgrounds. Among them was Tyler Brooks, the young mechanic from Hudson's auto shop who had once mocked her skills. "Each of you comes from a different background," she began. "Some of you are experienced security operatives. Others are medical professionals, logistics experts, or negotiation specialists. You're here because conventional thinking says these disciplines belong in separate compartments. Today, we begin proving that conventional thinking wrong." She paced slowly in front of them, making eye contact with each member of the class. The old model of security operations accepted casualties as inevitable. It treated civilian losses as collateral damage, an accounting term for human lives. It measured success by objectives completed rather than lives saved. "We're going to change that calculus forever." Sarah gestured to the training facility behind her, a sprawling complex designed to simulate everything from urban conflict zones to natural disaster scenarios. "Over the next 6 months, you'll learn to function as a unified team. Security specialists will learn basic medical procedures. Medical personnel will learn tactical awareness. Everyone will learn that the true measure of success isn't completing the mission. It's completing the mission without losing what makes the mission worthwhile." She saw Daniel Torres in the back row, now promoted to captain and serving as her chief training officer. His proud smile reminded her of his sister, of the legacy that had emerged from tragedy. 15 years ago, I made a mistake that cost lives. I spent years hiding from that failure, believing that the only way to protect myself from repeating it was to disappear. I was wrong. The only way to honor those we've lost is to ensure that their sacrifice teaches us to do better. Sarah looked out at the faces watching her, eager, attentive, ready to embrace a new approach to an ancient problem. "Some of you know me as Phoenix Lead, others as the Wrench Witch. A few of you know me as Commander Mitchell. Those identities are all fragments of the same truth, that our greatest strength often emerges from our deepest wounds, if we have the courage to face them." The final transformation. 6 months later, Sarah stood with Director Collins on the observation platform, watching the first class of the International Response Division complete their final training exercise, a complex simulation involving a hospital evacuation under hostile conditions. "They're extraordinary," Collins remarked, watching the seamless coordination between security teams, medical units, and logistics specialists. "They move like they've been working together for years, not months." Sarah nodded, feeling a profound sense of fulfillment. They've learned that true security isn't about weapons or tactics or even courage. It's about understanding that we're all connected, that saving lives isn't secondary to the mission, it is the mission. As the exercise concluded successfully, the teams gathered in the central training area. Sarah approached them no longer, feeling the weight of command as a burden, but as a privilege. "Today marks the end of your training, but the beginning of your purpose," she told them. "Next week, you deploy to your first real-world assignments. You'll face challenges no simulation can prepare you for. You'll make decisions that might haunt you for years. You'll wonder if you're doing enough, being enough, saving enough. She looked at each face, seeing in them the reflection of her own journey. Remember this. Perfection isn't the goal. Humanity is. The moment you forget that the people you're protecting are more than objectives, you've already failed. Trust your training, trust your teammates, and above all, trust the voice inside you that knows the difference between following protocol and doing what's right. As the graduates dispersed to prepare for their deployments, Daniel Torres approached. Commander, I've been meaning to ask you something. The photograph you keep in your office, the one with the original Phoenix unit. What about it? Sarah asked. I noticed you finally took it out of the drawer. It's on your desk now, where everyone can see it. Sarah smiled. Some memories shouldn't be hidden away. Your sister deserves to be remembered, not just for how she died, but for how she lived with courage and purpose. Torres nodded. She would be proud of what you've built here. What we've all built together. That evening, as Sarah walked through the quiet facility, she found herself in the memorial garden that had been dedicated to fallen operatives. Rebecca Torres's name was there, along with the other members of Phoenix unit who hadn't survived. For 15 years, Sarah had carried their deaths as a burden, a secret shame that had driven her into hiding. Now she understood that their legacy wasn't defined by failure, but by how that failure had transformed into something meaningful, a new approach to security that would save countless lives. The woman who had once hidden her skills behind a mechanic's coveralls now stood fully in the light, embracing both her past and her purpose. The wrench witch had become Commander Mitchell, and Commander Mitchell had become something even more important, a teacher, a leader, a catalyst for change. As she touched Rebecca's memorial stone, Sarah realized that the most powerful legacy isn't built by hiding from our mistakes, but by using them to forge something better, her journey. From the shadows had come full circle, not back to where she started, but to where she was always meant to be. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.